Join us by the fireside for our evening tales of true life's strange experiences with things that lie beyond the veil of the known and into the misty depths of the mysterious and unknown. The Late Night Walk to the Graveyard. This is a story about a brother-in-law's uncle who was a doctor in a small town in southern India. We can call him Dr. S. One night, after closing his clinic, the doctor was asleep at home. Then there was a knock on the door of his home, and Dr. S's grandmother opened the door. In India, there are two layered doors, an internal one and an external one, and here the internal one was opened with the see-through external one locked for any additional security and protection. So, in front of his grandmother, there was this person in the dark of night asking, in the local tongue, Tamil, for the doctor to go with him and to help his wife, who was pregnant and was in urgent need of medical care. The grandmother didn't really want to disturb Dr. S, so she basically said that he was resting and to please come back in the morning. However, the visitor was very insistent and persisted on the assistance of the doctor. Seeing that this was very urgent and this was a critical condition situation, she decided to go and call Dr. S. So, in hearing all the commotion at the front door, Dr. S actually woke up just before she got to his room, and on hearing the situation from the stranger, he agreed to help him. So he packed his medical equipment that he thought would be appropriate and necessary for the situation, and then he left with the stranger to assist him. On the way to his home, where his wife required assistance, all the routes were pitch black and without much lighting, so Dr. S still hadn't seen the stranger clearly. He could only make out that he was wearing clothes, but he couldn't actually see the detail of the clothes or anything because it was that dark. The stranger kept on telling him about how sorry he was to disturb him so late at night, but that this was truly an emergency and his wife just needed, just urgent medical attention. Then, along the way, the stranger turned towards a graveyard. And this kind of made the doctor stop in his tracks. And, he felt a little nervous. And he asked, "Why are we going that way?" The stranger responded that his home was actually behind the graveyard. And so the shortest route would be to actually go across the graveyard and to walk through it. So Dr. S agreed to follow him, even though he felt a little uneasy about the idea. And he wasn't completely convinced and thought that, it at least made some sense that he hadn't found a reason to doubt him, though. So he just kept going. Walking through the graveyard, they then walked close to a lamppost. And so the doctor was able to finally see the person who was standing next to him in, the dim lighting. At this point, the doctor couldn't believe it, but despite trying to locate the stranger's face, he couldn't see any. There was no face. All he could see were the clothes that he was wearing, or it was wearing, hanging in the air. At this point, he obviously tried to hide his shock because he was afraid if he showed that he was shocked that this thing would attack him. But he tried to think of an excuse. He was pretty quick-witted. He tried to think of an excuse to get out of there. So he came up with this idea. So he told the figure that he had forgotten some of the key equipment and needed to go back home to get it right away. However, the spectral stranger insisted that it wasn't required and just let it be and just go with him to his wife using the equipment that he had with him in the bag. But the doctor somehow managed to get out of it and said that the equipment was very, very important and that he would even leave his current case behind if he didn't believe him. Leaving the bag behind, though, he ran to his home, hoping that the stranger thought that he was hurrying to get the equipment rather than to escape. Once home, he told his grandmother what had happened, and they both stayed wide awake and vigilant throughout the night. But he eventually managed to get a little bit of sleep in the morning, but still shocked by the events of the night before, the doctor then went into work as usual and tried to get on with his everyday work, so as to forget what had happened the night before. But he couldn't forget. During the day, the local mayor, chancellor, basically someone in a high post at the town's local government, had come to his clinic to get his son checked up. While they started talking, the doctor mentioned how the local government could do more to install more streetlights so as to improve visibility at night. He mentioned yesterday's instance as an example without getting into the details of what happened, basically suggesting that he couldn't see anything while following a potential patient. The mayor seemed intrigued by the example, so he asked the doctor to explain a little bit more. To which the doctor then explained further details, but he missed out the part about finding that he was with this ghost, this invisible figure that terrified him. As things like this can be perceived as a sign of madness in Indian culture, the doctor was being careful. The mayor seemed really interested, but he also seemed unsurprised, which was kind of interesting. And so he requested that the doctor drop by his office after he closed his clinic. Still scarred by the events of the previous night and now worried about what lay ahead with the mayor, the doctor decided to close the clinic earlier than usual and went to his office. While he was there, the mayor asked for a clearer and more frank assessment of the events told in the afternoon because it was obvious that he wasn't believing that the doctor had told him everything. Once the doctor revealed the complete truth of what had happened, the mayor then proceeded to remove 3 files of doctors' records from his desk. Thinking that these were prospective doctors that may be invited to the small town, Dr. S was impressed and happy that more doctors were actually being invited into the small town in need of some medical expertise. However, the mayor said that these 3 doctors had been missing previously in similar circumstances that had been experienced by the doctor the night before, where they had been lured to a medical emergency late at night and then never to be seen again, and their bodies were never found. This obviously shocked Dr. S even more, and he started being much more vigilant. And he never forgot that experience, which could have cost him his life by a hair's breadth if he had decided to keep going with that phantom thing. Wow, my goodness, what a frightening experience. That's definitely the kind of thing you'll never forget. I mean, quite obviously, it sounds almost like those doctors were, I don't know, abducted, murdered. I mean, who knows? But the fact that this thing was just sort of hanging there and had no visible body or whatever shows that it's, very likely to be something supernatural and certainly something very sinister and dangerous. So, wow, great story, though. Unexplained experiences. I was staying with my boyfriend once, and he went to work in the morning, and I was super tired and stayed up watching movies that night while he slept. So I was pretty tired after seeing him off in the morning to work and staying up so late. So I decided to take a nap. Then, sometime later, I was awoken from what I assumed was him, walking in and crawling in bed next to me and holding me. I grabbed his arm and I pulled him closer and said I loved him. I ended up then falling back asleep. Then, a while later, he actually comes home from work and says, "Hey, baby, you're still sleeping." And I was so confused because I had already watched him walk through the door and lay down with me. Then he laughs and tells me the time and says, "I just got home. I haven't been here since I left." And it was not sleep paralysis. I was able to move and talk and everything, and I've never had an experience like that before. But I have had sleep paralysis, and that was not it. Another thing that happened at that same house was we had pulled up to his house one day and walked up on the porch. And as I was walking towards the door, I felt like someone ran into me. Like, when you're walking and someone rudely walks into you, hitting you on the shoulder, except there was nothing there. But it was so forceful, it knocked me back a few steps. And I told him immediately because it scared the crap out of me. But he didn't see because I was walking many feet ahead of him. He just laughed and said that I was being silly, but I swear that house or the land or something was haunted. And I also used to hear footsteps all the time when no one was there or everyone was in their rooms asleep. When things like this happen in a house, especially if it's an older home, I always kind of wonder what the history of that house is, and it'd be kind of intriguing to find out, who lived there before you and, what they did. I mean, were they playing around with um, Ouija boards, spirit boards or whatever? Or did somebody die there and, someone who had a really bad experience? I mean, who knows? But you just kind of wonder, why are these things there? Is the house built on an old Native American burial ground or something? It just kind of makes you wonder. My boyfriend's house. When I was about 16, I started dating my very first boyfriend. The first time I went to his house, we were hanging out in his room. And for whatever reason, I decided to take my shoes off and just leave them there when we went back downstairs. So about 2 hours go by, and his dad offered to drive me home. I didn't have a car yet. So I agreed, and I went upstairs to grab my shoes. However, right before I went to step over the threshold into his room, I stopped. I don't know what happened, but it's like all of a sudden I felt this huge sense of dread, like I should not go in there. It felt like something was warning me that they didn't want me in there at all. So I quickly went back downstairs and I told my boyfriend that I needed him to get my shoes for me. When he asked why, I told him what happened, and I was expecting him to laugh. But instead, his mom, who was listening, suddenly went white and her jaw dropped. My boyfriend looked frightened and just said, "Oh my God, it's happening again." At this point, I'm like, WTF? And he explained to me about the visions him and his brother would have, and how strangers could never go into his bedroom for the same reasons that I had. They had to eventually get that room blessed by a priest, which seemed to work for a while, but now it seems that it was back, whatever it was. So this was a reoccurring thing throughout our entire relationship. He would call me in the middle of the night and he would be hysterical because him and his brother saw this stranger peering into their bedroom in the middle of the night. Or I'd be there and hear unexplainable sounds while his dog just went crazy and barked at the hallway for hours. And one time I even saw his dad pass by me twice from the same direction, just seconds apart, in the middle of the night. I mean, what was that about? And we weren't sleeping at the time. We were just talking, watching TV when that happened. So my next boyfriend's house was even scarier, believe it or not. I don't know how I did it, but that one was even worse. But that's a whole different story anyway. So thank God that my husband now never had any freaky stuff surrounding him and he never lived in a haunted house. So I'm grateful for that.